I said I would do it, and here we are. I am now officially a desktop environment user. I am running KDE Plasma 6, specifically 6.0.1. If you need more proof I'm on Plasma, here you go. Here is the cube, which I still don't understand why people actually like. If you want to use the cube, make sure you have a package called KDE add-ons installed. Now, for context, I am typically not a desktop environment user. I'm typically not a floating or stacking window manager user. My entire experience on Linux has been on tiling window managers, whether that be i3, Sway, Awesome WM, BSPWM, Hyperland. Maybe there is something else in there as well, but I have been using exclusively tiling. Now you're probably wondering, what did I actually install? Because I didn't change distros to do this. I'm still using Arch Linux, and on Arch Linux, there are a couple of different ways you can actually install Plasma. You can install the whole Plasma group and get a ton of different Plasma packages. You can install Plasma Meta, which basically is the strict guidelines for how KDE probably should be installed. And you also have the option of just installing Plasma Desktop. I installed the third option. I just installed Plasma Desktop and install additional things as I actually need them. And I kinda wish more people installed Plasma the way that I did, especially if you have no interest in the rest of the KDE applications, because Plasma has a bunch of weird silent errors and things that just don't make any sense. A great example of this is in the system settings, display and monitor. This is how you configure your monitor layout. This is an extra package, and it's not an extra package on Arch. It is an extra package as per the KDE packaging guidelines. Why? Why is monitor configuration an additional module, but drawing tablet and game controller configuration are part of the Plasma desktop? Another fun one is with the cube. So the cube comes from KDE add-ons, and to make the cube work, you need to make sure you have a dependency called Qt6 Quick 3D. If you don't have that dependency, the cube just doesn't do anything. There's no error, there's no pop-up, nothing tells you why it's not working, it just doesn't work. Now, Arch should be forcing you to install Qt6 Quick 3D if you install KDE add-ons, but if it's missing, the desktop doesn't tell you what's broken. It just does nothing. One I'm still trying to work out the problem of is if I click Open Containing Folder on a wallpaper, it right now crashes my system settings, so clearly something is missing there, and it's doing something, but again, it's not telling me what is missing. Plasma has a notification daemon, it has a pop-up system, and even if you can't tell the user exactly what package they need to install because you would need to add different cases for every single distro, telling the user nothing is always a bug. Having a silent error is never a good thing. Finding all this out is kind of a side benefit of installing like I did. The reason why I did this, initially at least, is I just didn't care about most of the KDE applications. I was going to use the applications that I want to use anyway. The only part I actually cared about was specifically how the desktop itself actually worked. On that note, the biggest change for me is getting used to not having tiling again. I'm going to say it, and I know that some people don't agree with me. Floating windows absolutely suck. There is a time and a place for them, but floating by default is not a good experience, because what ends up happening is you end up having a bunch of these different windows all placed around the place, and you're like, oh, well, I want to find, this window, oh, yeah, okay, I want to get to this window, oh, okay, well, I gotta move this around and move this around. Like, there's no reason to have to worry about where your windows are placed, but it's a floating system. I knew I was going into a floating system. I can't blame it for being a floating system. And Plasma does do things to make the floating experience somewhat more tolerable. Most tiling window managers, their floating windows are very basic. Here, we actually have window snapping. Now, I feel like by default, the window snapping is a little bit too lenient. So if we go into the window management and then movement section, you can change the amount of distance you actually want the snapping to happen. I've got it to 25 to snap to the edge, and then 10 pixels for snapping into other windows. For me, that feels comfortable. By default, it's 10 and 10, and I always end up missing the side here when my second monitor actually starts. On that note, you can also push the windows into the side to expand them into full screen like this. If you push it to this side, we can either get a quarter, go down further, take up half the screen, same on the other side. Now, this works great if you have a single monitor. I don't. So getting it to actually snap in the right location here can be a bit of a challenge. I know in a future version they are working on having a fake monitor edge, so it will be a lot easier to drag it into this spot here and actually have it snap onto the correct screen. Right now though, it just doesn't work that well. And of course, we can't talk about Plasma window management without talking about Plasma's native tiling. And that is the last time I'm going to call it tiling, because is not tiling, stop calling it tiling, it's a bad port of Windows Fancy Zones. That doesn't mean it's useless, it is a very good baseline, it's just not tiling. So if we press Super T, which should be enabled by default, it's going to bring up this layout. Now, sometimes I've had issues with it actually opening and the entire system locks up, but when it does work, this is what you get. So let's go back down to a single tile here. What we can do is choose how we want it to be split. Let's say I want to have a horizontal split. It's going to automatically make this. We can go and drag this wherever we want. So we want this to be small over here or way over here. We could do that, or anywhere in between. I could then go and split either of these sections as well. Let's make a vertical split, and let's add a floating tile in here as well. This one we can drag around wherever we want, and also resize as much as we want as well. We can also go and change the padding between each of the sections, and padding is always nice to have. If I now click Escape, the layout is going to be saved. Now if I drag a window while holding down the Shift key, it is going to let me snap into any of those zones I made before. Let's put it into this one right here, make another window, put it over here, and another window, and put it down here. This does make things a little bit more convenient, but this is only a start to what I would want from tiling. Now, as you can see here, I've gone and removed the floating window. Okay, there we go. We had the complete lockup of my desktop. We'll try that again. Great that I captured that on video. Here you go. What I would want from an actual tiling system, just as a baseline, and I will do a follow-up video on this, is if I remove this window here, this window then expands into this whole section here. And if I remove this window, not that window, the other window, if I remove this window expands all the way into this section here. That would instantly make it way, way more useful. If Plasma actually wants to have something they call tiling, look at the way that tiling window managers work. Look at the way the new Cosmic Desktop works. What you have right now is not tiling. On top of window management, I also don't like the way that virtual desktops are handled. I have modified my capture because window manager users will not believe the way this works. What you're seeing right now is all three of my monitors being captured at the same time. My two vertical monitors and my main horizontal monitor. If I swap to Workspace 2, any window manager user out there will say, oh, the monitor you are currently on, that is the one that is going to go to Workspace 2. No. What happens is every single monitor goes to Workspace 2. Without additional plugins, that is the only way that Plasma works. This is a KDE bug report that has been open since 2005 per screen virtual desktops. This is another one I'm going to do a full video on because there is so much bad explanation from the KDE developers about why they didn't want to support this. It is going to be changing, but it should have never been like this in the first place. I like having it there as an option. If people are used to it, keep it there as an option. But per monitor workspaces should be supported. My other issue with virtual desktops is what exists by default. If we go into the system settings and virtual desktops, this lets you actually make them. By default, there aren't any of these. There is just 1. So if you were like me and went to the shortcuts to go and reset up the shortcuts because you knew that whatever they had by default is something you wouldn't like, if you then try to switch to a different desktop, you would be like, huh, why can't I switch to desktops? Turns out the reason you couldn't do it is because they didn't exist yet, and there wasn't any indication that there weren't any virtual desktops. Now, when you do make one, this thing is going to be added into your panel. It shows you what desktop you are currently on. But I didn't even know this existed because I didn't have any virtual desktops yet, so this didn't exist in the first place, so I was just left confused. Side note, if anyone knows of a widget that is far less space absorbing than this, something that maybe just lists out the current desktop name, let me know in the comment section down below. That would be very convenient. Now, there is kind of a hack workaround to make virtual desktops behave in a kind of sensible way. If you right click on any window, you can go to desktops. Okay, that's a Qt6 bug, by the way. Go to desktops, click on all desktops, and then when I swap to a different workspace, the window is going to follow you. But that also means the extra workspaces on your additional monitors now become unusable because they're being taken up by windows that are following you around the place. I just want to have per-screen virtual workspaces. Please get that resolved as soon as possible. Now, I unintentionally showed it before, but a bunch of the desktop effects end up leading to my desktop stuttering. The tiling editor sometimes doesn't open, like in that case, if we try it again. Okay, it opened that time, and when I close it, my mouse stutters for a moment. If I go into the overview, my mouse stuttered when I opened it, my mouse stutters when I close it. If I go into the cube, fine when I open it, and then stutters when I close it. The micro stutters aren't as big of a deal. The locking up of my entire desktop and the effect just not running in the first place, that made me want to quit Plasma the second it happened. Now, for anyone who's like, NVIDIA problems, no. I am using an AMD 6750 XT. Maybe it's Wailing compositor problems? I don't know. All I know is it's annoying. Now, this one I only noticed during the recording. I'm making use of a feature called Legacy X11 App Support. So what this lets me do is pass hotkeys globally into an application running through X11. So my OBS window isn't actually running under Wayland, it's running under X Wayland, so I can do things like pressing F3, it goes over there, F2 goes over there, F5 does this, so on and so forth. If I press Super T, and then I quit out of that, and I now press F5, my hotkeys don't work anymore. They don't work until I give the window focus again, and now we're good. Now, I know the video is sounding very negative and makes it sound like I hate Plasma. I don't hate it. I just think it's very, very rough around the edges. Here's something that actually is good. You might notice I have a clock right here. I also have a clock on my third monitor as well. The way I'm doing this is with the edit mode. So what edit mode lets you do is basically add in these things called panels. So this bar down here is called a panel, or we can add in widgets directly. So if I want to add in something like an analog clock, we can just put this wherever I want it to be put. If I want to add something like a application dashboard. Okay, that one, is that working? I don't know why that's not working. Is this one of these silent errors that breaks? I'm going to assume that's a silent error. Okay, let's get rid of that one. If I add something like a calendar, here we go. Now it says the date and all that, and I can just put this literally anywhere that I want it to be. I can put it on another screen. I can bring it back here. Okay, it's weird when I drag between screens. Apparently it lags a bit. I can make it massive if I want to. I can do whatever I want. This has tons and tons of customization. Also, if you resize it, I think it might change the year you're in. Why did that happen? I was confused. I saw that in the recording. If anyone knows why that year changed, I definitely want to know there. Also, if you watch someone like Nico Loves Linux, you probably know a lot about the floating panel. So this panel down here, if we somehow get it to bring up the thing, I don't know why it's not appearing actually. Let's go back in there. Manage desktop and panels. There's supposed to be a little pop-up window that appears here, but sometimes it just doesn't appear. I'll cut back to when I can get it open. Yeah, so I couldn't get the window to appear. It's not showing up. If you do see a dialog here, it'll have the option to switch between floating and not floating. I like my bars just being on the bottom of my screen. Edit mode when it works is really cool. But like a lot of things in Plasma 6, is still kinda rough around the edges. Before I move on, here is the camera widget. A widget which is kinda broken, which is firstly hallucinating a second camera which doesn't exist. I don't have something called the CamLink 4K, CamLink 4K. I just have one camera plugged in. Also, what does suspended mean? The camera you are seeing is currently in use, so is that supposed to mean it's in use or it's not in use? I genuinely don't know. I want to try to make this video more positive, but it's really, really hard. One more thing about edit mode. If I open up the add widgets dialog and then click exit edit mode like this, the dialog actually stays open. And from here, I can actually still add things, but because I'm not in edit mode, I can't drag it. So I can add these things, they just get placed in the default location, but like they're just stuck here. To go and move them, we need to go back into edit mode, and now we can do stuff with them. Okay, positive. Desktop portals. One of the issues I had with Hyperland is the portal was a little bit flaky for video capture. I occasionally had some crashes. I had a fairly consistent crash every time I tried to show my desktop after I was showing another capture over the top of it for a reasonable amount of time. It would just crash out my entire desktop. None of that. Perfect. I close OBS. I reopen, it remembers what I was capturing before. Literally not a single problem with portals. Now let's talk about system settings. I'm not going to talk about everything here, but I do want to talk about a couple of highlights. One of them is the way that shortcuts are handled. I changed my mind a bit on this because I actually like the way it's done now. If we go to something that has a default shortcut, let's say spectacle and then capture rectangular region, so you can set as many custom shortcuts as you want. You just click on add custom shortcut, press whatever you want. But also, that doesn't override the default shortcuts. So if you want to have multiple shortcuts that all do the exact same thing, you can very easily do that. But also, if you don't like your custom shortcut, it is very easy to restore the default. You just delete your custom, re-add the original, and boom, you're done now. Now, my shortcuts aren't going to look anything like yours. I do still have a lot of the defaults, but a lot of the defaults are things that I wasn't using, so I just haven't changed them. The ones I am using, I've basically ported over the existing hotkeys I had on various window managers into Plasma, and for the most part, I've found things that fit. On most window managers, there is a way to instantly jump your cursor onto another screen. It's useful if you're in a full screen game and you want to go and check a browser or something like that. I haven't worked out a way to do that yet. If anyone knows how, let me know down below. Now, desktop effects are where all of your animations live. One of them that I think is really useful for videos is if I press super and then plus, we have a zoom feature. So if we go over here, there you go. That is how you enable it. Now, you might notice that these are radio buttons here, and they do act like radio buttons, but they're radio buttons in a list of checkboxes. There is a heading that is not here, that I don't know why they didn't add, but yeah, go and add that. Side note, if you are going to use zoom, make sure you change it from the default, which is proportional, which is genuinely disorientating. So proportional is going to follow your mouse around. And I would change it to something like push. So with push, what that is going to do is when you push the edge of your screen, now it is going to move. This gives you a lot more control over where you're actually placed. One effect that I would like to see that I know is in the works is colored window borders, because the way that window focus is shown in Plasma is not good. So it is shown with a window shadow, which I can barely see. What I like to see, and we do have this really nice configurable accent color, is change the focused window to have a border that is your accent color. I know some people don't like colored borders, so just have it as a desktop effect, let me toggle it, and we'll be good. If you would like to configure that accent color, go to the color section under the global theme, and you can either pick one of the default colors or use the color picker here. Personally, I use the color picker. Pick this red right here if you want to use the same one I have. One thing to note about themes is make sure you don't have Qt5CT or Qt6CT installed, because if you don't know anything about KDE theming like I didn't, they will completely break your global theme. Just uninstall the package and let KDE do the theming itself. Now, all of this is assuming your system settings is working. I have had multiple occasions where it just completely locks up and is not responding. We saw that crash earlier with the open containing folder. So, assuming it's good, setting your settings is just fine. Now, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm being too harsh here. I think overall, Plasma 6 is a fairly good release, and really good relative to the history of the project. But it is still fairly rough around the edges, at least with 6.0.1. And there's a good reason why they're getting 200 bug reports a day, because yes, obviously a lot more people are now testing the project, but also there are still a lot of bugs that need to be ironed out. By the time distros like Kubuntu start shipping it though, we should be on 6.1, and by then, I would expect a lot of these early issues to be ironed out. Any big release is going to be rough, and for the most part, is not as rough as it could be. So, let me know. Are you running Plasma 6? Have you run into any of the issues I've mentioned today, whether that be the issues with tiling not being tiling, whether it be any of the stutter issues or edit mode completely breaking? I would love to know. Let me know your thoughts down below, and if you have some bugs you want to report, please don't report them to me. If you want to tell me about them, please do that, but there are proper places to report the bugs as well. So, let me know your thoughts down below. And if you like the video, go like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribe, Liberapay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and we are definitely not done here. I've still got a bunch of Plasma videos to make. Something like this.